So one of the things that I heard yesterday is that 47% of survey respondents for one of the analyst groups was citing the fact that there was a lack of IoT expertise, and that was a limiting factor in the growth of IoT. So perhaps one of the issues is looking a little further afield than usual suspects. So we have a question over here or comment?
Yeah, just what I'd like to understand is your advice on how to bring the young generation of women into the STEM fields. So I was walking around in the theme parks and I see all these young girls getting the princess treatment at the Bobbie boutique, and was wondering how could we build enthusiasm similar to the gushing that we're seeing there for, say, pre-calculus or something.
Gotcha. And just because you're dressed up in a princess outfit does not mean that you are not into the pre-calc.
Absolutely. It's not mutually exclusive.
Not mutually exclusive at all. So I think we all have a little bit of an unconscious bias. When you see the princess outfit, you may not be thinking pre-calc. Fair enough. I have to admit, it would come a little bit difficult to me too. So I'm going to start off. I always tell people this is a frank and open discussion. So all questions are absolutely valid. We won't mock you too much until later. So I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves because I always say they do it better than I ever could. So want to start off?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lynne Canavan, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing for the OpenFog Consortium. Bobbie asked us to talk a little bit about our background, so I think I subscribe to the Yogi Berra School of Career Advice, which was, you know, if you come to a fork in the road, take it. So I started off at, you know, after I got out of school, I went to Harvard University and I was doing fundraising there. And from there I went over to Hill Holliday, where, by the way, our receptionist was Karen Kaplan, and she's now the CEO of Hill Holliday. So they definitely I was definitely brought into an inclusive environment, and I worked for a woman named Ann Finucane, who happens to be the vice chair of the Bank of America. So Hill Holliday definitely had a lot of empowering types of programs for women. And I found out I was better at PR and moved to the PR group, and our head, who was a woman named Susan Parrish, had been recruited by Regis McKenna to start the East Coast office of his very successful agency, which was working with Apple and Intel in those early days of Andy Grove and so forth. And so Susan was recruited, and then she recruited me. And from there, I went to, so I did PR for a little while, and then I decided I wanted to go on the industry side, worked for a startup, and from there, started my own business, and then was recruited into IBM, and I worked for IBM for about 17 years. And when I was leaving IBM, there was a little group that was starting this group called the Industrial Internet Consortium. So I became their first employee and brought that up, and we and left that there after about 2 years, and helped to go over to OpenFog, which was just getting started. So definitely a little bit of eclectic, but it all just kind of seemed to make sense at the time.
And give us the 15 seconds about OpenFog. I know everybody here probably already knows, but just in case.
Sure. OpenFog is the consortium. It's a global consortium of industry and university members that are working collaboratively to build an open and interoperable architecture for fog computing. We think that fog is enabling IoT, is the way to enable IoT. Fog basically brings cloud functionality down the layer between the cloud and the devices to help make things happen in much more to be where you need latency, you need cognitive capabilities much closer to where the devices are created and so forth.
Great, thanks. Heidi?
Great. My name is Heidi Wilson, and I work at Telus Communications, which is a Canadian carrier, for those of you.
Is your mic on?
It should be, yep. Put it up a little bit higher.
Maybe a little higher?
Hello, is this thing on? Can you hear me like this? Yeah. So Telus is a Canadian carrier, and I work in the wholesale group. Right now, I'm responsible for global IoT primarily. I've had a lot of different roles, and actually, it's interesting to hear we probably all have similar experiences with our career development. When I talk to younger people, they look at my background and they're like, "Oh, it's like a perfectly executed plan." I'm like, "If only." But I actually started out with a degree in French, which was pretty useless, and ended up getting an MBA to try to pivot to something that would actually make me money. So now I'm interested at parties and I can make money. Anyway, after I got my MBA at McGill University, I lived in Montreal for 18 years. I'm Canadian and American. Actually, I never know which to say first, but I've got dual citizenship, a little bit like a spy. From there, I went into product management, channel management, marketing, and then most recently, sales. I would say that generally speaking, I've always gravitated towards areas where things are complicated and ambiguous and nobody knows what to do. That's generally been technology. I purposely targeted technology. This is back in 1999 when I got my MBA, where I said, I don't want to sell corn chips. I want to be into technology because I think it's cool and interesting and nobody really understands it. At that time, it was kind of emerging. And then I've kind of always made my hops in my career based on that ambiguity. So got into wireless for that very reason. I did some social media back when that was a new thing. So always looking for the next new thing. And part of my skill set and what I do for Telus is making things happen when nobody knows how to make it happen. So.
Great, thank you. Natasha?
Great. Good morning, everybody. My name is Natasha Nader. I work for a company called Quectel. I've been there for about a month and a half now. Quectel is a module manufacturer headquartered in Shanghai, really breaking into the North American market. So it's an exciting time for the company and to be a part of the organization. My background in IoT started probably about 6 years ago after I graduated from college at University of Virginia with a degree in American Studies and Sociology with a very specific focus on women's studies and kind of race and gender from the sociological perspective. I moved to Spain where I wanted to learn Spanish, so similar to Heidi, kind of the language component. And after teaching English for several years, realized that I wanted to change and found IoT just randomly while living in Seville, Spain, and worked for an MVNO, at that time named Pod System. So that was my introduction to IoT, to connectivity, to technology, because historically it was more kind of on the journalism side. My plan was to go to Spain for 1 year, learn Spanish, come back, do a PhD in women's studies, and teach college about women's studies and history and things. So different path, but here I am with women on a similar front. But so that was my introduction into IoT and the connectivity side. I then moved back to the States and worked for Wireless, which was acquired by Core a couple of years ago. So kind of maintaining the MVNO space. So I managed all of our relationships with carriers as well as with hardware manufacturers while at Wireless. And then most recently, before moving over to Quectel, was at the same company from Spain, now called Pod Group, with a solid establishment here in the US. And I was their Director of Strategic Partnerships for the last 2 years or so, and started a partner community, again, of kind of OEMs and hardware manufacturers, as well as bringing over network relationships to Pod. So had the connectivity background, now kind of excited to be in the module, more device space, and see what that's like, an exciting, just same industry, but just a different perspective. So yeah, that's been my background in history in IoT.
Great, thank you. And MaryBeth.
Oh, great. Thanks, Bobbie. And good morning, everybody. My name is MaryBeth Hall, and my current role is Director of Global IoT at Verizon Wireless. And similar to my fellow panel members, when I first started college, everybody around me said, go teach, go be a teacher. So I got a degree in elementary education, and when I left, I also got a degree in marketing and really wanted to try business. I thought I could make a go of it and worked for a small startup selling computers, installing them and then selling the maintenance agreements, because that was the big thing at the time. I loved it. And then I came over to what was then Bell Atlantic Mobile Systems. We were the startup arm of AT&T when we divested in the States for the RBOX, if you will. And we started up cellular and started to build the company from the ground up, starting in care, moving over to HR and training. Then I started up all the channel management within our B2B group, did some product management as well. In my most recent roles, and as far as IoT goes, when Verizon was looking at kind of the cellular landscape, we kind of looked at the cell phones. Everybody was migrating from flip phones to smartphones, and we were kind of thinking, okay, what's the next big thing? And IoT came about, and several years ago, we started a business unit really trying to figure out how we can make money in IoT. We're still trying to figure that out. No. But I was tasked with kind of building that organization, so we were like a startup within this big organization. And that seems to be where I thrive. Similar to Heidi, I like to do the next new thing that's on the plate, and whatever that new means, whether it's a new technology or a new business unit within the organization, that's normally where I gravitate to. So we built up IoT. We're a $500 million business right now. We've got a whole channel program working for us. We've got a lot of infrastructure things within the organization. I think part of the challenge with our customers and our partners is trying to figure out how IoT is different than maybe just connectivity or cellular connectivity with cell phones and tablets and things like that. I think all of us struggle with that, because IoT clearly is different. It's a more complex sales structure. So my task is really looking at the products that are coming down the pike, what's going to make a difference for our customers, looking at the marketing. So now I'm looking at the whole marketing as far as Verizon goes, and making sure that we have one voice as far as IoT goes. Because like at many big organizations, we've got several different voices within each of our business units. But one comment I'll make, and we'll talk a little bit about your particular question that you said, is all of us kind of gravitated to very traditional roles for females, but we were able to move out of it. And I think we're going to have a frank discussion this morning about what we can do as a group to be able to propel young female or younger women to be able to go into STEM programs. What can we do to do that? So we're going to be talking about that throughout the panel this morning.
I'll just build on what you mentioned. When I was getting my MBA, I said I was kind of worrying aloud about, I didn't know what concentration to do, and I wasn't really sure kind of where I wanted to go with my career. And I was talking to a finance guy, and he said, well, you should go into HR. Mm-hmm. And yeah. I mean, at that moment, I decided I'm going to do anything but HR. Certainly, I would be the worst. I've made people cry. I would never be in HR. So the only reason he said this is because, I'm a girl. Mm-hmm. I couldn't believe that. So anyway, at that moment, I actually decided that I wanted to do everything that was kind of the opposite of that, mm-hmm. and try to do things that were kind of hard and weird, mm-hmm. and misunderstood. Just my kind of contrarian nature. I was like, forget, mm-hmm. that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot. And I'm going to chime in just with a little bit of my background. Innovation Women is an online speakers bureau. We provide speakers for conferences and events to avoid the all-male, all-pale panels that you see particularly at technical conferences and events. I will say that IoT is a lot like many of the other industries that we work with, where there is a shortage of women both on stage and in the audience. And there are different reasons for that people don't tend to think about. Number one, women are more likely to work part-time. So it's hard to get out of the office for a 2 or 3 day conference when you only work 2 or 3 days a week. Number two, women are more likely to be involved with childcare, elder care, working at home in the community. Again, harder to get away when you have those other responsibilities. I've actually been talking to an organization that provides childcare at conferences, specifically so women in tech can go to them. And also, let's face it, women are also more likely to work for smaller companies and to own smaller companies, which means that it's a little bit expensive to go to a conference and an event. So again, they are less likely to accept invitations when they're handed out for speaking, and also to go to conferences overall. So those are some of the kind of other factors that get involved with this. And you cannot be what you cannot see. Having women on stage at conferences and events is super important to getting the next generation. So seeing some women on stage speaking my God, yesterday's speaker, woo, she was awesome. I can't remember from Intel, yes. She was fantastic. Maybe, you know, a little more of that, a little less princess dresses. We might see a different situation there. My background is 35 years in high tech. I've worked with companies such as Cognos, spent several years at the helm of the PR department inside PTC, and also organizations as far back as, oh God, I know I'm dating myself, Digital, FTP Software, among others. So let's start off with a conversation about what you've seen inside your own organizations, inside other organizations, that does work. Getting women out, getting them inside the organization. So who wants to start us off with that one? Talking about the programs that do work for diversity and inclusion.
So I'll start, and then we can, you guys can all chime in. So at Verizon, we actually, one of the things that we found with women in tech, and especially in my group in IoT, since it is so up and coming, is that we're able to attract female talent or diverse talent. Maybe we should just even open that up a little bit. But we're having a difficult time retaining it. Because being included in conversations in the hallway.
When you speak that way,
yes.
The microphone's that way, so it's much louder than when you speak that way.
That way, okay. There's more people over there that side.
You're going to ignore that side of the room for the moment. Okay.
So I think, you know, having an organization, we call it the Women's Association of Verizon Employees. It's called WAVE for short. We have members and we have actual mentoring programs. I've got several mentoring circles that I do for the female talent, really just to open up their eyes to what else is available within the organization. Being able to have them network, skills that you may think are so common to most of us, they're not. They really need to help in being able to do that. And they actually just need someone to help guide them along and be there, you know, just right on their shoulder as they're kind of getting through some of the more difficult things. I think one of the things that I keep hearing from women is they have a little voice in their head that says they can't do it. And we've gotten that a lot from maybe some of the unconscious bias that we have or some of the things that we may have heard growing up. And so our job as technology leaders is really to start to elevate that. And when you see that, reach in and try to find out a little bit more of what's going on or include others in going out and lunch events or association events, anything that's going on so that they can feel more inclusive. In addition to the WAVE and the mentoring circles, we have mentoring circles and then they do one-on-one. I've got about 7 or 8 women that I do one-on-one mentoring with. And then we also do a lot with women as far as attracting talent and hiring. So we'll go to different trade shows looking for that talent and being able to interview them on the spot and hire them on the spot so that we can bring them in and try to keep them included. But by linking them to a mentor right away, a leader within the organization, that really helps. Hopefully that will help the retention. I don't have great stats yet to share with you since we just started some of these programs.
And just to build on that, when I was at IBM, the mentoring part of it was very important, and it was actively encouraged. And I think I'd like to speak to everybody in the room, men and women, that, you know, the mentor in your life, or the mentors, you know, more than one, they will absolutely have an impact on everything that you do. So, you know, regardless of who you are, when I was at IBM, you know, we had some very senior executives. I mean, the chairman of IBM is Ginny Rometty. And they all, we'd have senior executives talk, and they would all talk about their mentors and what their mentors had done with them. So up and down the chain, it was really widely encouraged. So definitely that is something that I think absolutely helps everyone. I have a few women that I consider mentors, and they're, you know, they've given me fantastic advice over the years. So.
And actually, I'm going to jump in too and point out the early aspect. My mom said it was 6th grade when I came home and announced to her that girls are not good in math. I learned that in school. And she said you'd been on a trajectory before that of math and science, math and science, math and science, and 6th grade, it all went to hell in a handbasket. I did apply and was accepted at several universities for mechanical engineering and ended up with a communications degree. So those comments stick with you over the years. Now I did manage to bring it all back around and probably work now with the geekiest of the geeks, but it does tend to kind of stick in your head when you are continually told by teachers, peers, and also society as a whole that, you know, your group does not do something well. So.
I think there's but I do think there's, I'm from Massachusetts, and there are a lot of progressive programs through the schools. I see it in our schools, and I see it in the local community. MIT has a program that they offer to they're targeting the middle schoolers, and it's for, you know, they have women, young girl programs, but they also, it's for everyone, but they have these programs where they want you to come, and they make it fun. So it's, you know, it's making, it's some robotics, but it's Legos, and it's, they just make it really, really fun, a lot of very diverse programs that they do. And I think that there is more of a conscious effort. And yes, of course it exists, and there are these biases, and girls, you know, do back off from these things. But I think that, I'm seeing, at least where I live, there's more of a program of trying to get these math clubs going and have these, you know, girls participate in them and actively do so.
I think there's filling up the pipeline of women, and then MaryBeth talked about retention. And I think that one thing that Telus does, and this is potentially a purely Canadian thing, programs for maternity leave are actually quite important for helping to keep women from exiting the workforce. And you know, Canada has 1 year paid maternity leave. It's paid for out of the social system. It's kind of similar to like unemployment insurance. But then typically large companies will top up to allow a woman, and her job is guaranteed when she comes back, and she's typically able to live on a percentage of her salary. And I think that that's extremely helpful for women when they do get to their, you know, their childbearing years and they start having kids. They're not kind of forced to kind of re-vector and become a stay-at-home mom because financially it doesn't you know, make any sense anymore, and they're not sure that they're going to get their job back. So I think that's one thing that like society as a whole can do, and then Telus, you know, specifically does that quite well.
Yeah, that's technically called the leaky pipeline, where corporations and the business world as a whole tends to lose women as they're hitting that middle management, those years, and women will leave the workforce completely and have a hard time coming back in. But I will tell you, it's not just women. We were talking about our personal situations in terms of what made us successful. And I offered up the fact that my husband has been at home for 20 years, raising our 2 children, and about 7 years ago, started to look around for a new job because the kids were a little bit more self-sufficient and he could do that, and came to me and said, no one will hire me. I have been out of the workforce too long. So it is not just related to women, it's related to parental responsibilities. And how companies handle that is actually quite interesting. So you were talking a little bit about your situation.
Yeah, I was mentioning when I went to IBM, that was when I was starting my family, or I was working there, and then I had just gotten married and I was starting my family. And while I was expecting my first child, they instituted a permanent part-time position. And I went to my manager and said, I want this, I want this. And he said, absolutely. He was very, very, very supportive. And throughout my IBM career, I remained full-time from that moment on. And I loved it because it did give me that work-life balance, which I think as you talk about the next generation and also the millennials who are entering the workforce, that work-life balance is important to everyone, you know, young men and young women across the board. But I was part-time, and I remember at one point I was looking, because you know, when you're in a large corporation, there are lots of job opportunities, and I was looking to change, and I was talking to a prospective group that I was going to go into, and the woman who was running it, you know, being part-time, she said, we're all part-time. part-time. I have 5 jobs in my job description. I am not full-time on anything I do. It's fine. And I thought that was really an encouraging and inspiring way to think about it. I also there was a woman, and she was a group vice president at IBM, and she was part-time, and she was counseling us. We'd have these conference calls where where we would all talk about, how do you balance things in? Because a lot of times you had a part-time job, but you actually had a full-time job. You just happened to do it in part-time hours. And she was telling me that she kept, because of her position, she was pretty high up, and she kept getting the, hey, we want to have the Friday, I need you on these calls on Fridays, which was her day off. And so finally she just said to them, Friday just isn't working, but Saturday morning is a great time for me. And they stopped, and so, again, it was through that environment. It was very supportive and enriching. So it was a great experience.
And not just families either, right, Heidi?
What's the question?
Weren't you telling us you had something else that you do that keeps you busy?
Oh, yeah. So I don't have kids, but I do use my kind of extra time to develop real estate. So that's my side hustle.
I think the term was flip houses?
Yeah.
In your spare time?
In my spare time, yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What's your situation, Natasha?
Yeah, I mean, right now, just starting kind of this new job and getting really familiar with a whole new industry, so I don't have any free time. So it's great, but just kind of actually going back to the other conversation that we were having before, if I can go back, if that's okay. Just because I figured, so MaryBeth and Heidi and Lynne have come from bigger companies, so my experience has been a little bit different in that the companies that I've been in haven't exactly had very formalized mentor programs. So that's been an interesting experience just to see how that experience has been for me. So when I first started at Pod Group, again, that was in Spain, and there was only 4 of us to start, and we were 2 men and 2 women. So that was just, 50% was a great percentage to start off on. And then now the company from then on has grown, and now the company is about 50 people, and still I think the percentage of women is about 40%. So it was really interesting. So my ex-boss has made it a big priority to try to hire as many women as possible. Obviously, very qualified and competent women to be on the team. But that's been awesome just to see kind of that evolution of the company and to maintain that same high percentage of women. When I first started, when it was just, again, the 4 of us, we all had to read Lean In. We had discussions about it. And that was, back probably 5 or so years ago, right when the book came out. So that, back then was pretty, pretty good back at that point. And now just kind of when I moved back to the States and just kind of entered the actual IoT space here in the States and started going to meetings and sitting in on more executive meetings, realizing that, I'm usually the only woman in the room, except for I've had meetings with Heidi and MaryBeth in the past. So you kind of remember the women, but generally you're kind of the only woman, and for me it was woman and then person under a certain age. So it was kind of 2 things that were very different, but also make you feel very empowered. My experience has been just the women were very supportive, as well as the men, just in terms of looking at you obviously as an equal, as they should, and then just being part of the community. So that was just a different experience than having a more formal mentor program, having to kind of build my own. But I've been able to develop those relationships, which has been great.
That's great to get this small company perspective as well. So another big company, how is the big company handling kind of keeping people on the team?
So for Verizon, besides doing the mentoring circles, we also, we have a very big diversity program, and we do some training for leaders to make sure that everybody understands their unconscious bias. But you know what, I'm going to just take a step back for a second. And as we were getting ready for this panel, I just want to share a quick story, and I think it kind of illustrates what we can do even in our homes and our families. So I have 2 sons and a daughter, and they were all home for the holidays. And my daughter was having some trouble with her Mac. And as soon as the trouble started hitting, she couldn't get one of the applications to run what she needed it to do. And as soon as it happened, she immediately was calling my son Ryan to come help her, the engineer, And I said to her, Amanda, why don't you just try to fix it? Let Ryan, he's He was actually shoveling. Let him go finish the shoveling, you know, which is so typical, right? And, you know, I got her to actually fix it herself. But I think all of us just naturally will try to go and ask somebody for help when we can actually figure it out. So, you know, encourage your folks at home, your younger ones at home, if you have them, boys or girls, it doesn't matter. You know, have them figure it out. Let them figure it out for themselves, because that'll help them as they get into the workforce in different scenarios that they're uncovering. She did figure it out on her own and then went out and shoveled. So we're getting there. It's little baby steps as far as that goes, but I think all of us can play a hand in doing those things within our own families and lives.
I would say if I had to choose between diversity programs and educating the kind of the young people and giving them skills, this all starts with competence.
Yes.
No, we're all in this to make money. I actually, when I was invited to this panel, I didn't know we were going to be talking about being women. I thought that it was just women talking about IoT, so I was a little taken aback when we had the pre-call, and I was like, oh, so you want me to talk about being a woman? Because I don't go around thinking about the fact that I'm a woman. I go around doing my job, doing my stuff, trying to make money. You know, so I'm uncomfortable with the like women-only stuff. But nobody's going to say no to competence. There's always the very few, but they're dying off. So really, like, let's invest in the competence. Let's invest in people being able to, do the hard things, having the skills that are super in demand. And you know what? Then you're going to have the employers who are like, you know what? Whatever you need, you got it. You need, part-time. You need this. You need that. We need your skills. You're making us money. We are going to help you do that.
Yeah. I would say that's probably the biggest thing. The biggest issue that I've had in my career is that I don't know why or for what reason, but just this kind of lack of confidence that I constantly feel like I need confirmation, whether it be from a boss or from a colleague, that I'm making the right decision because maybe my background isn't super technical and I'm hired for a certain role to manage the channel, yet I feel like I need to have the same skill set as an engineer, as the director of network engineering, as this, when nobody's expecting that of me, but I'm expecting those things of myself. And then constantly feeling like I'm given the authority to make a decision, yet I want somebody just to confirm that it's the right decision. And that's the feedback I constantly get from bosses is, you know exactly what you're doing, it's why I hired you, just go do it. And I'm like, okay, but are you sure? So my last name is Nader, and my current boss named me the Inquisinator because I'm very inquisitive and ask lots of questions, but I'm just constantly trying to confirm that it's the right decision, but it's that confidence that you are making the right decision and not constantly needing that confirmation from a boss or from a colleague. And I think that I've seen that in the college setting, in the work setting, and primarily from females. And that's something that I want to change in myself so badly, and that I think needs to be changed kind of on a widespread level. How, I don't know, but I don't know if you guys have felt the same way.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So jumping off from there, if any of you saw the panels that were here yesterday, the Analyze This or the Money Matters panels, I mean, I'd love to get your perspective on those things. We had a couple of all-male, all-pale panels at the front of the room. And getting a different perspective is what diversity and inclusion is all about. We all know, and we've probably all seen the studies that say that more diverse working groups, more diverse companies are actually more successful companies. So more successful panels is kind of the offshoot from that. So if you guys had something that you wanted to add in on the finance and investing, I think the last question on Money Matters is if you had, an X amount of dollars to invest in IoT, in whatever, where would you be putting that money? Where would you be putting your dollars? So this is your chance to talk about what's going on in the industry overall. I realize that's coming out of left field a little bit.
So I think, my viewpoint is that, technology really is the great equalizer. And I think that, as you were saying, I think you have the opportunity, if you have a great skill, if you're in the right environment, that's all that you need, you know. And I'm going the long way around, you know, the Yogi Berra path to the answer. You know, I think, you know, if you're in an environment where you're not supported, go look for another job. I mean, that's really the thing. You want to look for, you know, the saying, do what you love what you do. I think you have to add to that, work for someone you love and work with people you love, especially in this industry. I mean, we are in an industry where your company is going to get acquired tomorrow. You know, we're all in a fluctuation. It's the day of going into a job and being there for 30 years just doesn't work in today's world. And so the people that you hire or the people that you work with likely will be leading new companies and things like that. So you definitely want to make sure that where you are is in an environment where you think you can grow or you can make those connections that will help you to grow. So you think a couple of steps ahead. So when I think of where the investments are, I think, you know, there are definitely hot technologies. Of course, I'm biased towards fog technology, but I do think, you know, there are definitely pockets of innovation. And, you know, some of them are very, you know, innovative ideas that are, you know, founded by women, you know, organizations or men. I mean, again, it's that great equalizer on what is the merit of the area itself. So I look at what the technologies are versus, you know, I think, again, with technology, there's just some great things coming up.
I was so intrigued and excited by all the talk about AI yesterday. And I was getting a little bit nostalgic looking back at kind of the past conferences. I mean, I've been coming to the IoT Evolution conference since, you know, early days. And I was thinking back to how the conversations were several years ago, where it was all about how do we get these things to connect? What platform are we using to manage it? So it was really about the connectivity, and being a carrier, we're still kind of there. But I thought it was so interesting to see all this talk about AI, and that's really use cases and automation on steroids. It's really just another word for automation and alternative use cases for AI. So I feel like we've finally gotten to the stage in IoT where we get away from the plumbing, and now we're really talking about the business value, and the business value using some tools that are kind of blowing my mind, and in kind of taking our ability to automate really to the next level. So, you know, went from, you know, this thing talks to this thing, and then if yes, then do this, if no, do that, to things that are like truly automation and really society changing and business changing for all of us.
I think one of the things that we want to know is why this all matters. You know, why bother is probably, you know, one of the questions that I get asked occasionally when people are, I think, well into their cups at a cocktail party after some events. Why are you doing this? Why does this matter? And, you know, some of the conversations are around hiring, but are there other reasons? And, you know, why are you up here? Is, I guess, the long and short of it.
I hope this is the last all-women panel that we have to specifically set up.
Yeah. That would be mine.
I get asked a lot what I would do if I was given a panel at a conference, and I said, I don't want a panel. I want half a panel. I want half a panel for every single panel at the conferences. So I would like half of every panel to be some level of diversity so that we get interesting conversations. And we get people that are not talking to each other, they're talking to a diverse audience.
Harkening back to Canada, so Justin Trudeau, I don't know if you guys follow him, he's so cute.
Yes, we do.
But anyway, so I don't know if you guys are all aware, but half of his cabinet is women. And so when he was asked about it, and not to mention the fact that it's actually incredibly racially diverse and ethnically diverse. So his cabinet is like the picture of diversity. And when he was asked about it, specifically about the women, you know, why he had chosen to have 50% of his cabinet made up of women, his answer was because it's 2015. So I really think that the answer is kind of as simple as that. You know, because it's 2018. Like, are we really talking about this? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I love the fact that the Minister of Innovation and Technology was female. And I've done some work with her. And she's also a leading scientist that led a expedition up into the tundra to try and discover the source of the Spanish flu. It's like, okay.
What have you done with your
life?
life?
What have you been doing with your school vacations?
I think going back to what Heidi said though about competence is really important. I never want to feel like I'm on a panel or I'm in a position only because I'm a woman.
Right.
And it's not based on past experiences and competence and abilities and skill set that I have just strictly because it's 2018 and there should be a woman there. That's not a good feeling. But to actually, be in a situation, in a meeting, at a conference, on a panel, because you have earned the right to be there and you have the experience and the skill set to be there, that's what's empowering. And I sometimes have a hard time articulating why I love being a woman so much in IoT, in a male-dominated industry and all of that. And I think it probably goes back to when I wanted to teach women's studies in college. I've historically just kind of loved that evolution that women have had. And now we are actually in a critical time where this is a male-dominated industry and we are watching it kind of shift and are helping that shift happen. And it is hard to try to figure out how we can even propel that forward even more and bring more women in. But I think it just simply goes back to the fact that, if you had asked me several years ago, do you know what a channel manager is in the IoT space, or, regional sales in IoT on the module side? I don't know. Do people know what those things are besides basic roles coming out of college? I think it's just kind of more educating women and people in general on other opportunities that exist in technology in general.
Yeah. And so I'm going to bounce a little bit off of what Natasha and Heidi mentioned, but just take it up a level. I think for organizations, we're all in it to make money, and we want the best person for the job. So I think just diversity in general, whether that's gender, race, sexual preference, we need diversity at our tables for us to be successful. IoT happens to be the type of product and industry that is really kind of calling that to light because it is such a diverse product. It's a more complicated product in some regards, and it's a very simple product in some regards, right? So it runs the gamut, and I think we may be seeing it in this new evolution and the growth that's happening in IoT more than other units, or we're actually addressing it because we've got some talent of you guys in the room that really want to change things as we look at businesses. But it's really for our businesses to make money. Diverse organizations, in Canada, he's already done it, right? And so I think we all need to do it. A quick stat for you that I was looking at, in 2013, Barack Obama started the STEM program. And we were at 22% of female talent in technology. We're at 25% now, only up 3%. So it's still something we're all tasked with really trying to get our younger generation interested in these programs, because I think that's really going to make the difference for us as we move forward with some of these technologies.
I think we need to put the pedal to the metal on getting the youth engaged in STEM, yes. And I'm very concerned when I look at some of the things that I've seen in society with pink Legos and the princess dresses. When I was raised in the 70s, and there were just Legos. There were no pink Legos. And I certainly dressed up, but I played with Lincoln Logs. And I feel like there's a really weird shift of this kind of gender separation of girl stuff and boy stuff. Yeah. And I see it happening. I have twin niece and nephew. They're 4 years old. And I live in the South, so it's kind of a different culture, and they're around it. And the boy has actually said, girls don't play golf. And then we went to a piano recital. Full disclosure, I wanted to be a concert pianist before I got my MBA, so I'm actually an accomplished pianist. So this really hurt me when he said, and then we went to this recital, and he said, girls don't play piano. And I just almost lost it. I mean, the boy's only 4, but I instantly corrected him. But these are things that are happening at a very young age, and allowing these kind of the pink and blue thing to continue. I know that we all kind of roll our eyes when we see how Target kind of put all the toys into one thing. There's maybe a good and a bad way to do it, but we need to really challenge girls to get engaged with things that are hard and smart, and not just all about the pink and ruffles, because that's not going to help them later.
I actually get worried at another level. It's the amount of social media and stuff. Actually, I was just ready to say, we have questions from the audience that we can address as well. So it looks like we've got one over there. We have our mic running. There he is.
On my way. I appear as if from nowhere. Raise your hand again. I don't know where you are.
Right over there.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to comment for a second on kind of the pink and blue thing. So a father of a boy and a girl. I mean, my daughter grew up playing with pink Legos or dressing up as a princess, coming to Disney and going to Bippity Bop, but none of that affected her interest in math and science. I think, as we said earlier, it's not mutually exclusive. As a parent, I support her interest. I encourage her to explore different things. Her elective, she's a 7th grader, her elective this year was STEM, was a specific STEM class. Nice. So I don't want to get too bogged down in that subject. I think as parents and society, we have a role to play in encouraging the girls to get involved in math and science. They can still be girls and boys and enjoy kind of princesses or army or whatever they want to enjoy, but that doesn't prevent them from going into math and science and getting involved in IoT and wireless and all of those things. So I sat here yesterday and looked around the room, and I actually tweeted a comment. I was disturbed. I looked around, I counted about 20 men for every one woman that was sitting in the room. The numbers are different this morning because of the panel, but I thought, boy, this is a shame. But I at
Actually
one
doesn't
moment,
look that different.
At a single moment, I never thought about, boy, I gotta stop having my daughter buy pink stuff or dress up as a princess. I thought, boy, what can we do to encourage our children, both genders, to enjoy math and science more? So I think there's just a key role that we really play as parents and leaders sitting in this room and leaders in technology to include and promote diversity more, irregardless of kind of some of the other gender considerations.
We've got some other questions and comments here. I will address actually that one question. For me, I have 2 boys at home, and my husband and I talked about the fact that we have some nieces, and we call it the pink code. And the pink code is when you see a toy that has been simplified or dumbed down and made in pink. So the number of toys that I've seen for boys with a larger number of parts or complexity or engineering skills required, and then the aisle of pink stuff for girls is more imagination and nurturing oriented. So yes, there absolutely can be pink Legos, and I'm not a big pink fan myself, but if that's a color preference alone, nobody cares. But if it's a code for dumbing something down, I think we have an issue.
I just wanted to make a comment to that as well. So interesting, back in college, I wrote a paper on the book Dress for Success from the 80s. Yeah. I don't know if anybody remembers that. It was my research, but that kind of blew my mind. And I think from then forward, this idea of femininity and professionalism and competence in the workplace being mutually exclusive as well is something that I have never subscribed to. I mean, I think now it's a little bit different, but before, this idea that you need to dress like a man in order to be taken seriously in a working situation. I don't feel like I need to be less feminine to be taken more seriously, and I actually, I'm gonna dress exactly how I wanna dress, I'm gonna do what I wanna do, I'm not gonna, again, wear things that are more feminine because I don't think I'll be taken more seriously in a meeting, because that was brought up to me once. And I, to use Heidi's words, I almost lost it. Like, no, I'm not going to dress a certain way to be taken more seriously because I'm trying to dress like a man. I think that goes against what we're trying to accomplish. So, to that point, I don't think that the pink things and things are bad, but when you start dumbing them down, that's when we have a serious problem.
Hi, Diane Nastri, Octotelematics. I think, is it on? Can you guys hear me? Oh, right here. So Diane Nastri, Octotelematics. I really believe in the rule of 3. People can pretty much only remember 3 things when you're either giving a talk or just chatting or whatever. And my rule of 3 for this conversation, and I might be reiterating stuff, but whatever, is that, especially when we're talking about young kids, as a parent, be involved. Don't leave it up to the teachers. Start early, like from the cradle. Expose your kids to everything, international, technology, the arts, whatever. Just expose your kids, make sure they're getting a great education in the home and outside the home. And the third thing is, excuse me, getting over some bronchitis. Be an example for your kids. Walk the walk and talk the talk. So, and it's funny, with my kids, I have a boy and a girl too, they're both in college. My son ended up, majoring in international business. My daughter changed her majors 3 times already, and she's a freshman at UF here in Gainesville. She started with, can't remember now, business and real estate, changed to art and technology, and now it's interior design and maybe law. Whatever. So it's just, I really believe in the exposure and letting them do what they want and encouraging them, whatever they want to do, just, go with the flow.
Got one here first.
Good morning. I'm Don Malloy with Vasco Data Security. I have 3 daughters and 3 grandchildren, three granddaughters. And we bought my granddaughter a Lego set. And I came down one morning, I saw it, and she used all the pieces. And she said, "Look what I did, Gumpa." And I looked at my wife and said, "We need to buy her more because she's brilliant, and we just feed that." But my daughter, one of my daughters has an MBA from a top school, and she was on a career track at a big company in LA, and she went on maternity leave. Came back, her job was pushed aside, she was given this lousy position, no more on career track, and she left in 6 months. She quit, she called the company and told them, she said, "You screwed me," And this is where we need to have a change. We need to have a change in the corporate culture that women can still have a career track and still raise babies. And that's an expectation that I think is getting difficult for some women to feel that they can't do that. Because they say, "Oh, you're just going to go off and go have babies. And we're going to push you aside." And that's not true. My daughter runs circles around most of the people she works with. So it's something that we just need to keep working on.
I have to say, one of the things, I firmly believe, for the people who have worked for me over the career, I think working mothers are some of the most productive employees I've had, just because they know how to juggle their time. They know how to get things done. They know what the priorities are. When you're a working mother and you've got a kid who falls and needs to go to the hospital, you know how to prioritize. You know how to get things done. And I recently in one of the jobs I had an open hire for a marketing manager, and I had some really talented men and women apply for the job. And the person I hired had been out of the workforce for 9 years, and raising her family, and she had been out of the workforce for about 15 years and had come back and decided to get back into the workforce, and she went and became an intern at a social media company where she was the oldest person there, and to learn the skill, and then ended up, and so I was like, with that initiative, and I hired her, and she was an absolutely terrific hire and stuff like that. And I think that the stigma of that, and they can't ask you that. It's illegal to ask if you have family. You can't be asked those questions. But I really do think that there is a stigma that is really unfounded, because some of the most productive people, they know how to get things done. They don't have infinite time.
We've got about a minute and a half. I want to make sure we get one last question in and then have a chance for a wrap up. So super fast.
Just a quick observation here. Sarah LaLiberty. I'm the owner and founder of an IoT company called Mainspire. Observation is that, I grew up in small and medium-sized businesses and was mentored by men. And that was incredibly helpful. I had no women in my life to mentor me in the technology space. So I encourage all the men in the room to look around, and whether it's young men or women in your companies, if they have no one else, please reach out and be a mentor to them, because that's what they need. And also, when I was ready to start a family, my husband and I had a conversation about, we both have an MBA, we both have earning potential, who's going to do what. And my career was something that I very much enjoyed, and I looked at a lot of my friends who were also successful women entrepreneurs, and we are the ones who are leading the charge. We are the men from the 1960s who go out and bring home the bacon, and our husbands are the ones who are staying home now. So I'm seeing that be a huge thing, so very similar to Bobbie's situation. But
I've got to break in. We've got to give them a chance to wrap up. So super fast, guys. You know, last parting words.
Lean in and make diversity and inclusion part of your 2018 goals.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and you know, to her point, just kind of the mentor situation, I think it's very, very important, and I don't think you really understand kind of the value of what that means, because again, I've had men and women mentors, and I think it's just, it makes a world of difference as we all kind of go towards this similar
Okay, Heidi?
I hope this is the last Women in IoT panel that we have.
And mine is just go where you're celebrated. Again, if you are a woman and you're in an organization that really does not recognize your value to the organization, leave. And I know it's not always as easy as that, but you know, expand your networks and really look to see where you can really grow and be valued for who you are. And that goes for men as well.
And wrapping up, watch your unconscious bias and start early, folks. And round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.